Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Tigers Radio Podcast here at MotorCityBengals.com. I'm Rogelio Castillo, alongside is Uper and Chris Brown. If you know where to find us, today is a bonus show, so I'm not going to go into the formalities too much, but you find us iTunes spot. Yeah, you know the rest. So with the White Sox show we did Thursday, we didn't really get a chance to talk about some of the spring training stuff and what have you. So tonight we're at Bad Hop Studios West. So I'm going to explain that a little bit. So Chris's former show, where him and I first became acquainted, Bad Hop Radio, is his former podcast, which I have some ideas about, Chris, that we should bring back. That'd be kind of cool. But anywho, you have the control. So Chris is about 15 feet away from me right now. So we're actually in the same room for once. But what's nice is we're testing out a new setup. So Chris has got a new Rode mic. I have the other mic, and I was able to finagle and get everything set up. And Uper, I recommended Uper for a mic for his phone that is omnidirectional, or excuse me, kind of like a lapel mic kind of thing, and you can hook up to your iPhone. So we got that going. So all the technology is going through here, and so that is the reason why you subscribe to our patreon.com/Tigers Minor League Report, because it goes into little things and I find deals and go from there. So, but yeah, we're going to get in plenty of the Tiger conversation this evening, and we had some questions, and just straight. Let's just get right to the point. Tigers lost today to the Orioles 5-3. The first time they stick in the Orioles, they've faced the Orioles all season in spring training as part of their pod. So earlier we were listening to the game on radio. Some sloppy defense came out of there. Miguel Diaz got lit up, who's trying to fight for a bullpen spot. But Tyler Alexander looked good. And for all accounts, it looks like he's ready to go, Chris, for spring training.
Yeah, and Tyler Alexander is just a guy who goes and gets outs. It's never terribly sexy. And I don't know. I mean, to me, it'll be an interesting argument at some point, him over Manning. I think Manning's going to win no matter what. They're both going to be in the rotation to start the year, I believe. But yeah, it's just I don't know. He's a guy. He's the sort of classic bulldog who just goes out there, throws strikes, and tries to get out. And yeah, like you said, the defense let him down today. I think there was 2 errors by Jack Lopez on one play, and another error later in the game, I believe, that cost the Tigers. Yeah, 3 errors for the Tigers. So, but that's unfortunately that's one of the things you get with Tyler Alexander. Is he's a pitch to contact guy. He's not going to miss a ton of bats, except for that one time when he missed all of them in a row. And so every now and then you're going to run into some defensive miscues. But from what it sounded like, he sounded like he was good. We had no video footage today. I think it might be the only game all spring that doesn't have a camera, because I don't know what's going on with Baltimore's spring training home. Apparently, they don't even have like an advanced scoreboard. Dave Dickerson was talking about how it just has balls, strikes, and outs, or runs. There's no velocity, nothing else. But yeah, I don't know. It was an away game, so of their regulars, who was there? Like in the starting lineup, it was Candelario was the only regular, really. Yeah, I think they had a couple other young guys come in later as pinch hitters, pinch runners, and stuff. But yeah, so it was just one of those away games in spring training.
I think Tyler Alexander, he's kind of that classic profile of kind of the spare part guy who throws enough strikes, keeps in a left-hander who can probably just keep milking that career for a long time, and should be pretty handy this year, especially I still don't believe Manning throws more than 120 innings, even if he's effective.
All right, so I'm still getting used to this whole technology setup here we have, but yeah, Matt Manning yesterday pitched, and there was he had his breaking ball out early, looked pretty good, but then left a couple hanging over the plate and got hammered. And Chris, this is all part of spring training you work on. It looks like he was trying to work more exclusively on his off speed, but this is spring training. It's just one of the things. It just happens as he's trying to make his way and get ready for opening day.
Yeah, I think with Manning, there's always an element of someone like Manning is he's not guaranteed a job, but he pretty much is, unless it's a complete disaster. And I wouldn't say that yesterday counted as a complete disaster. He made a couple of mistakes and got rocked really hard. I think the Phillies hitters 3 consecutive balls over 107 miles per hour against him. He gave up 4 in the game, and he gave up 20 of those all year last year. So it was like, here, yeah, he really wasn't dialing in his location. But like you said, spring training, none of it really matters. None of it counts. As long as he doesn't continue to get rocked. I mean, think back to a year ago at this time. Casey Mize was getting rocked, I think, in his first 3 or 4 spring training outings. And then, he settled down and everything was fine. So I think with Manning, we don't have too much to worry about. Although, as I often say, I'm not a huge believer in the ceiling there, but whatever.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, especially with some of the position battles you have right now, and there's a lot of interesting storylines with spring training so far. But one of the things that probably helps Manning a little bit is the fact that he has got a spot in the rotation, and that kind of really kind of allows him to be more comfortable. Maybe we can't look at, like, right now, for example, here we are looking at spring training battles for the outfield, and today was an example of both Victor Reyes and Derek Hill. Hill made a good catch. Same with Victor Reyes. And Reyes had a double off the wall, I believe. And Hill, I think he stole a bit. He got on base as well. He had a hit, struck out, but they both looked really good today. And so it's almost trying to nitpick those kind of things. As we try not to, but as far as Matt Manning is concerned, when it comes to starting pitching, spring training allows you to work on your craft. It allows you to work things out. And so, but as far as the bullpen goes, we'll get to that in a second. But overall, Matt Manning's final line yesterday was the lines before we get to the Matt Manning thing. I just realized Tigers, look, the Phillies are going to have in for a long season if they get. I know they had a lot of guys that weren't going to be up in the roster, but there was a stat here. There was an inside number that it was a really good inside number that we'll get to here in a second involving Riley Green. Yes, this is our first inside of numbers for the year, but it was the fact that Manning, he recovered, finished it out, but then you got Soto, who went out there 98 already, struck out a pair of batters. Michael Fulmer looked already good to go. But there was one performance yesterday that gave Chris a pause for concern, and that was the loss of velocity, which, again, could be nothing, from Andrew Chafin.
Yeah, I don't want to make too much of it. Michael Fulmer's velocity is down too. It's just, it could be part of the process for these guys. They're veterans. They're not probably going all out right now. They know what they can handle. I just thought it was worth mentioning because we've seen situations before where, hey, a highly touted middle reliever shows up and suddenly he's not throwing nearly as hard as he was before. And Andrew Chafin's game isn't based on velocity, but there's a certain threshold you have to be a major league pitcher for the most part. I don't think he's going to be a guy who's going to succeed at 88. I think 90 to 92 is where he has to live with a fastball, so his slider plays off of that. But again, spring training, he's probably just going out there getting his work in. I wouldn't think too much of it. He got rocked. He didn't seem too upset about it. So,
yeah. As far as that, here's the echo there in the background. But as far as that goes, yeah, there's really, it could, like, I remember at this time too, right? It was around this time when Michael Fulmer, we were all concerned about that velocity drop. So, but in terms of a left-handed point of view, you still have 3 lefties. And Alexander will be in the rotation starting the year. Then when Michael Padilla gets his visa problems all taken care of, he'll be the swing man. And so that will be, again, the Tigers will have that kind of versatility, that really 3 different lefties that can throw 3 different styles, and just allow them to have another, in terms of even like among the AL Central teams, I thought that they have a very intriguing bullpen, but Soto out there, no problem at all. And speaking of, in terms of other pitchers and moves, that was a bad segue, so I apologize about that. But no, in terms of cuts yesterday, the Tigers are continuing. More cuts will be coming tomorrow, but before yesterday's game, Tigers opted Miguel Telpozo, Cody Clemens, Zach Short, the AAA. All 3 are on the 40-man roster. Drew Carlton, Josh Lester, and Jacob Robson also have been assigned to minor league camp, with the assumption that those 3 will be all 6 of those players will more likely be in Toledo. Telpozo is on the interesting thing about Telpozo is, if you're looking at the fact that probably more likely Spencer Torkelson, we saw the opening day lineup yesterday with Spencer Torkelson and Riley Green more than likely taking the roster spots of Spencer Turnbull and Jake Rogers. But with the 28-man spot and the battles, DePozo did not have a good spring. He got roughed up against the Yankees. I believe that was on, was that Friday? Was that, I can't remember I know he got roughed up yesterday, but I was trying to think of another game he got roughed up. Either way, DePozo has struggled this spring. Tigers don't need 4 lefties out there. But is DePozo's spot, I'll start with you, Uper, is DePozo's spot on the 40-man roster in jeopardy?
Well, I think someone on his level probably, gets up every day and checks his phone. There could be a call coming at any point for that. The end of the roster, those guys got to grind and just hope for the best and hope that, chips fall in their way. Certainly a slow start in spring is not a good sign for him. I don't know if the Tigers have a ton of needs beyond getting Torkelson and Riley Green on the roster. And as you mentioned, they have 2 pretty easy spots for that. I think in the end, the teams like to hold on to as much talent as they can for as long as they can until it's absolutely necessary, though. So, but if he goes, he goes. I can't see, they won't sweat it.
Yeah, no, I think he's probably the first to go. If they need to make room, and they probably will if they're going to add Green and Torque. I had my conspiracy theory that I mentioned in the last show, but I think that they're going to start with Green and Torque, and that's going to take the 2 spots, and so they'll need to clear 1 or 2 spots to add to get up to the 28-man, presumably, and maybe they'll stick with the relievers that are already on the roster, but. Yeah, I would think he would go. And then who else did we think? I thought maybe Zach Short. He was also sitting down the other day, wasn't he? And we like some of the things just Zach Short does. He's got some power. He's a decent infield glove, but they've got a kind of an army of those guys now. And at a certain point, it's just a numbers game. So.
Yeah.
Willie Castro, I think, is somebody. It was interesting. It was interesting to hear Hinch talk about how useful he is, and have the entire Twitter world say, "No, he's not."
Well,
go ahead, Chris.
It's just something I've been saying for a while that I think, and I've said this in the podcast for years and years and years, that the teams tell you what they think about players by how they use them or where they put them in the minors. And we saw last year, Willie Castro got tons more playing time than someone like Isaac Paredes, who was technically a much more highly ranked prospect, who fans like more out of something. Willie Castro does something or multiple things that AJ Hinch likes. He's kind of a bumbling. I called him a schlemiel the other day, which is a Yiddish word for basically somebody who, like a clown or somebody who just is clumsy and bumbling. And that, he kind of made a silly play in the outfield, but he's not a natural outfielder. You understand that a little bit. And I think Hinch likes that he does have some power, more on that in a bit, and speed, and he can play all over the field. Like, there are a handful of guys in the roster like that, but managers have their guys. You guys lived through Leland with Don Kelly, and Sparky Anderson had a dozen guys, didn't he? So it's just the way it goes sometimes.
One of the things that, in terms of, here's the roster, by the way, for anybody that's not watching us, watch us on YouTube, on Tiger Minor League Report. But the lineup looks something like this. The opening day lineup yesterday against the Phillies, I think, would probably be the opening day lineup. About Dew batting leadoff, Robbie Grossman, Javier Baez, Candelario batting cleanup, Cabrera batting 5th, Scope 6th, Riley Green batting 7th, Spencer Torkelson batting 8th, and Tucker Barnhart batting 9th. And I think that's just, to me, that's a good way to start opening day. There's, as far as Akil Baldu, which we'll get to in our inside the numbers, and well, actually, Riley Green will be part of the inside numbers. The Akil Baldu is part of my good and bad and the ugly. So, but either way, we're getting ready. This is the last final full week of spring training before the Tigers have, I think they play till, I believe, Wednesday the following week, and then they have Chicago for opening day, which, by the way, it was listening to the podcast when we had both Janice and Crystal on. It sounded like all doom and gloom about the White Sox.
They really did.
Yeah, they beat the Dodgers today in a meaningless spring game, I think like 9-0. But I'm still, let me just say this: I'm still petrified of that offense because it can mash. But then the more I thought about what she was speaking about, their dysfunctionality, the more you realize that the White Sox still don't have a right fielder. They still have they don't have a rotation. They don't have no rotation depth. But check out the podcast that was dropped on Thursday, and Janice and Crystal, again, great job of just explaining what's going on and really kind of. I like to think our podcast, quote unquote, keeps it real, and sometimes I know Tiger fans or fans in general want to hear always the positive, and there's plenty of positives to be about. But for our White Sox fans, they are predicting that the White Sox will get to the World Series or get really far. But I don't know. It's after that conversation, I realized, like, man, Chicago is flawed, and the Tigers they complimented the Tigers. So for any Tiger fans out there, there's your little sliver of optimism. Because I don't have the music bed, so we're not going to be able to throw this in there. Uper, do you have your inside the number this week?
I get a slap on the wrist. I do not.
That's my bad. I don't think. That's me. Okay, that's on me. But yeah, that's usually in spring training. We do it towards the tail end of spring training. So, but my inside the number this week, or Chris, you'll go ahead with your inside the number, and then I'll go ahead with mine.
All right. It was this is something that if you happen to be on the Tigers Discord chat with us, you may have seen me mention this a while back. My inside the number this week is 29.8. And this continues my long tradition of bringing up numbers that are kind of interesting but mostly useless. So the other day I was noticing, speaking of Willie Castro, I was noticing that he had one of the hardest hit balls for the Tigers last year, but his average exit velocity was super low, 85.6. So I was like, I wonder who has the biggest disparity between his maximum exit velocity and average exit velocity from last year. So I looked at it. I went to Baseball Savant and I set the minimum batted ball events to 250. I figured that would be enough for us. And again, I'm not terribly sure this means anything, but it was Willie Castro at 29.8 miles per hour. He hit a ball 115.4 miles per hour last year, which is hard. Anything over 115 is as we were saying in the chat, that's a bit of a piss missile, right? But his average exit velocity was just 85.6, which is not hard at all. That's it was lower than Walker Buehler, Aaron Nola, John Lester, and a handful of other pitchers.
John Lester. Ooh.
Yeah. So, but here's another thing. The second highest gap was Jonathan Scope at 29 flat. Everyone else was above 27.4. So the Tigers have the two biggest gaps between guys who crush the ball and hit the ball very softly. And then Javier Baez was 8th and Akil Baddoo was 16th. So at least in terms of like all or nothing contact, the Tigers are going to be one of the great teams of all time, I think, this year, where he may crush a ball or he might just hit it very softly.
That's very interesting.
There we go. All right. Like I said, it's going to take some while to get used to this remote setup. But by the way, if you are watching us on YouTube or on our, by the way, Twitch channel, which we did start this year, I haven't checked Twitter or Twitch numbers yet because it's going to be a while before there's any type of audience on there. But if you're listening on any, or if you're watching us on any of those three channels, oh wait, you're muted too.
I just because I knew you were, but yeah, I didn't know if there's something I need to do over here to show chat comments or if.
Okay. Just hit comment.
I don't know if we are or not. That's why I just didn't.
Are we getting comments? This is bad. This is bad podcasting. Bad form there is. But either way, there's the link. If you're watching us on there, it is available. You can watch or you can join in the Discord channel. Some great conversation talking baseball. Pretty much, there's a lot of people active on there all the time. So, but my inside number was one that Chris posted about earlier, and it was the number that really kind of, if you think about Riley Green and it was just a number that you don't hear very often, but Chris's stat was Riley Green is seeing 4.75 pitches per plate appearance this spring. Robbie Grossman led the Tigers last year with a plate appearance of 4.21. And that coincides with exit velocity that Riley Green's put 8 balls in play, and his average exit velocity is 95.1. So, oh, by the way, Frankie Montas, short attention span. They're just showing a highlight. Anyway, that to me shows a guy who already is ready to go. And out of all the Tiger outfielders, he might not have, like, in terms of just being among leaders in hits so far for spring training, but just everything, as you said earlier, quote, a piss missile, Chris. And I think that's going to be the new podcast slang for it all. Just piss missile, perhaps. Or urine missile. No, urine missile sucks. No. Sorry, folks. If anybody listening out there, I know people might just think of, piss sounds so vulgar. But when you hit something that violently, it's vulgar. I mean, you're like, you swear. Don't act like you don't swear when you have a good golf swing or a good swing, whatever. But yeah, word Vango's. Yeah, see, word Vango's going to be in Discord. Good job, this word Vango. Ooh, by the way, fantastic listener. So thanks for watching us on YouTube Live. But yeah, so yeah, when you think of piss, that's a violent word. So you should be. I'm all right. I'm digging myself a hole here, so I'll stop that. But so why don't we go into our good and bad, the ugly? Whipper or Uper, you think you have anything you could whip up pretty quickly?
Go first, and I will.
Okay, that's right. Okay, so my good and bad, the ugly this week, I will let Chris start that. Go ahead, because you had some really good ones that you were ready to go for Thursday.
Yeah, well, one of them, my original good was Miguel Diaz, and then he got roughed up today, so I had to switch around. And it's actually kind of piggybacking on what you were saying about Riley Green. And this is, we all know that Riley Green is good, and the expectations are pretty high. But so far, he's living up to him. It's spring training. It's not a ton of experience yet, but 7 games. There's going to be peaks and valleys all year. It's tough for young guys, but he's 4 for 12 with a homer, a triple, a double, 3 walks, and 4 strikeouts. And as you mentioned earlier, he's seeing tons of pitches per plate appearance. I don't expect him to be the most patient hitter in baseball all year long. I think just as we wouldn't expect him to continue hitting 333 all year long, right? It's 7 games. He's 4 for 12. He's seen a lot of pitches. I think that's his process this spring for kind of getting ready. He wants to see as many pitches as possible. Maybe that's always what he wanted to do. I haven't checked to see, what he was looking at last year or the year before. But with the condensed spring, it makes sense. See as many pitches as you can, get your timing down. But no, I mean, just everything we've seen from him so far shows how advanced he is. You can get him to swing and miss, and he'll chase occasionally. But it's one of those things where if you make a mistake, he's making you pay. And we saw it in the other game. He was 2 strikes against a lefty, and he's never had a problem with lefties, which is one of the best things about him. And the lefty left a breaking ball over the heart of the plate, and he crushed it for it was a 106-mile-an-hour liner to the gap, and then he hustled for a double. And just everything he's doing looks good. He's been perfectly fine on defense. We haven't seen him have to, make any crazy plays. But really, that's what we're talking in center field. Even as big as Comerica is, he's going to be able to make like 95% of the regular plays, I assume. It's just like those 5% that we don't know if he's going to have the range to do. But he's good. He's probably going to be my good a lot this year, maybe once a month. My bad. Speaking of the Orioles, they were playing today. Just a bummer here. Heston Kjerstad, I don't know if people know who that is. He was actually the 2nd overall pick in 2020. He went right after Spencer Torkelson. That lives in podcast lore is the reason that Rogelio had to jump in my pool because the Orioles made the big splash. They shocked everyone. He was considered like a top 10 pick, but it was one of those things where they took him 2nd to save money, and they liked his bat. But there was no 2020 minor league season, so he didn't play. And then he came down with myocarditis, so he missed all of 2021 with that. And remember, that's what Eduardo Rodriguez had, enlargement of the heart, basically from a virus, I think, something like that, which is scary as hell for anybody. And he said he finally felt normal in November. So that's basically 15 months after he was drafted, he finally felt normal. And now he has a nasty hamstring strain, and he's expected to be out 8 to 12 weeks. So his last competition was in March 2020 with Arkansas. So he's going to go over 2 years without facing any real competition. And, that's just a tough break for anybody. I mean, I don't feel particularly bad for the Orioles, but I feel for the kid. That's a tough break a tough way to start your pro career. And my ugly, and unfortunately, is another sad situation. We saw this in the Tigers game against the Blue Jays. It's the worst thing. One of the worst things you can see in a game, other than, I guess, maybe a pitcher taking a line ball to the face or a hitter getting hit in the head. Jose De Leon, who he threw a pitch and then just crumbled on the mound. And it really sucks for him because he was an amazing story, really. He was a guy, and we talk about the Dodgers development program all the time. He was a guy the Dodgers drafted in the 24th round back in 2013 out of Southern, which is not a huge baseball school. They've produced a handful of big leaguers, including Ricky Weeks. But really, it's the SWAC. I think it is. It's not a hotbed. But a couple years in his pro career, he had lost a bunch of weight and gained velocity, and he was a top 30 prospect in all of baseball after being a 24th rounder. And then the Dodgers traded him to the Rays for Logan Forsythe. Remember Logan Forsythe? He was a player for like 2 years with the Rays, and then they traded him to the Dodgers, and he disappeared. But since then, it's been nothing but arm injuries for De Leon. He had Tommy John surgery in 2018. And then he popped up with the Reds last year and had one of the technically still a prospect at like 28 and had one of the most bonkers stat lines. And that was actually what Dan Dickerson was trying to say right as he got injured. So last year with the Reds, he threw 18 and a third innings, 22 hits, 17 earned runs, 11 walks, and 33 strikeouts. So it was a 36% strikeout rate, but a 439 batting average on balls in play against. So he got rocked, but also missed all the bats. So anyway, it was, there's a guy who still had some talent, just probably hadn't had enough innings, and he kind of caught on with the Jays this year, hoping to just get his career going, and just see him collapse on the mound. Like that's probably another torn elbow ligament or something awful, and he's going to be out for another year, if more. And you have to feel for the guy. Like I feel like every fan base probably has a situation like this. For me, it instantly brought back memories of Joel Zumaya, collapsing on the mound against the Twins. I think it was.
It was
against Delman Young. Threw a pitch, and that was when he actually threw so hard he broke a bone in his elbow. I think it was, and he never threw another big league pitch. But his last pitch was 100 miles an hour, I think. So I don't know. It was ugly, and I feel bad for the kid. So that's it.
All right. Well, go again. Yeah, as far as that goes, speaking of the Orioles too, they're gonna be part of my good and the bad, the ugly. The good starts with Akil Baladu's home run off Ryu on Saturday, which was Ryu's first start of the spring. Happened to be his birthday as well. And that was Akil Baladu's first home run since July 23rd, 2016 off a lefty when he was in rookie ball for the Twins. So it's a positive sign. He didn't have any home runs. He only had, I believe it was 4 or 5 doubles against or lefties, or one extra base hit last year against lefties. So Akil Baladu has by far had the best spring so far, and his approach at the plate, he's still very aggressive, seeing it the first pitch rather, and you gotta, in terms even defensively, he looks like he's ready to go, and I really enjoyed watching him play, and just the helmet flying off, which is all that stuff is fantastic. The bad is been the speaking of the Orioles, by the way, and the Orioles already gotten beat up enough with their payroll and what have you, but there is something else. Imagine being a Baltimore Orioles fan, right? And that, by the way, they lost. I was wondering about this earlier, and I couldn't remember, because one of my favorite voices is Gary Thorne, and he is, if you remember a lot of ESPN hockey in the 90s, if you watched a lot of hockey, but he does a really good job with Oriole games. If you watch the game where he does the golf, talking golf, when the stadium was empty during the Baltimore riots, it's one of the funniest moments. So, but the Orioles are going to I believe are going to be the only team that will not have neither the radio nor television broadcasters on the road at the start of the season. And the Nationals also have this in terms of will also not travel. They'll have their television broadcasters travel. So, which it has a lot to do with COVID. And this comes from the human resources person from MASND, and just basically saying they're just taking, really, and I quote, an abundance of caution due to the ongoing COVID pandemic, which is hopefully be winding down and soon be behind us, as a prudent step in the context of a changing regional sports network. That's what MASN is. In MSAN will begin the season operating on a hybrid model that enables the network to conduct production locally while leaving all the major production pieces in place on the truck site, Dow said. So, but the reason why I was talking about Gary Thorne is he is no longer, in terms of a play-by-play guy, it's no longer gone. It's going to be Kevin Brown, will be the in terms of full crew. Kevin Brown will be the main guy, but Gary Thorne has moved on, and I don't know. It kind of sucks. I'm not gonna lie, because I not that I listen to Oriole games anyways. It's not like it's something I listen to, but Gary Thorne is one of those voices. Hopefully, whatever he's doing is he's a consummate pro, and I'm a big fan of his game and excuse me, the way he calls the game, and so yeah,
he'd be welcome in Detroit.
Oh yeah, but I'm not. You know what? I'm not going there. But it is. But Melanie Newman, by the way, who did a fantastic job last year, will be back in the booth. Ben McDonald, who had some interesting tweets, and Jim Palmer will be back too as well. So the Hall of Famer. And my ugly involves, my ugly this week is there's a lot of things about spring training. You have to kind of take it with a grain of salt. It doesn't matter. We've said that. We'll continue to say that because, quite frankly, none of this, all the stats, all that stuff, don't matter. But the ugly to me, it stands out with the Arizona Diamondbacks because here they are. The Diamondbacks are starting over in a lot of different ways. And the reason I say they're ugly is they gave an extension to a 5-year extension to Marte, which kind of like, okay, that's great and all, but correct me if I'm wrong. Diamondbacks have been one of those few teams this offseason, like the Cleveland Guardians, that haven't done squat at all. So imagine, I mean, this is okay. Sounds like I'm being real kind of a dick about the whole thing, but think about it this way. What are the Diamondbacks in terms of like talent wise are going to build around them? You haven't done anything. I mean, am I missing something? Arizona's going to be this good team in a division that's this stacked? Did I miss something about Arizona?
They do some curious stuff. They brought in Melanson as to be the closer. He's like 38 on a bad team. I don't know what that does for him.
Yeah, and I mean he's one of those guys that's always going to be involved. For a while, he was involved in every single trade at the deadline. You got traded to the Braves, he was traded to the Pirates, and he even pitched in San Francisco for a little bit. But that's it. I mean, I just the reason why it's ugly to me is because given a matter of next year in 2023, are they just going to trade him? I mean, it's just you know what I mean. Like Chris, am I missing something here?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's a good player. So if you want to have good players, that's a good idea. And I'm all for bad teams still spending money on guys. But it is kind of curious because like two of their top position prospects are outfielders, Corbin Carroll and Alec Thomas. So I don't know if they're going to move Marte back to second base eventually or what there. But yeah, or maybe they'll use the prospects of like, you don't not sign guys because you have prospects, but it still is like, hey, these guys are pretty close and they're part of the future. So I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to say why. I mean, I guess a similar situation would have been the Tigers in 2018 extending Nick Castellanos.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Marte, I don't know if he's ever been a free agent. I think he may have had his like, arbitration years already purchased from him, but or bought out as it were. So I don't know, but yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to our traditional line of thinking where if you're going to suck, you suck all the way and you get rid of your veterans. And I don't know, to a certain extent, maybe they should be lauded for spending money, just like the way the Rockies, like we have no idea what you're doing, but all right, spend money. It's better for the fans to have some players they want to root for. But yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to the way we understand modern baseball.
Yeah, and the Rockies was the same thing with the whole Chris Bryant thing, but that's what you expect, that kind of madness from the Rockies in terms of their ownership and the way in terms of I forgot Dick's last name.
Monfort.
You expect that from Colorado. You expect some sort of insert joke about them being legal about weed into that kind of madness, like reefer madness or whatever with that. So it's expected. But for Arizona, Arizona's made some curious things. I mean, they made La Russa, they had David Stewart on top of the front office not too long ago. That was a disaster. And this is an organization at one point that had some, they had AJ Hinch in mind. They've had some smart minds in there, but for whatever reason, I don't know. It just seems like even though they want a new stadium, the stadium's like now, it's a whole different conversation. Stadiums are now 23 years old and either 20 to 30 years old and then just gone. So, Uper, what is your good and bad ugly this week?
My good, I'm just going to mention Bobby Witt Jr. really, he's kind of having the same kind of spring, the same kind of hope that Riley Green is. He's already hit a couple home runs. A lot of people looking really optimistic about what he's going to do as a rookie. And I would think that, having seen him play last year, having followed him for a long time, I have a hunch that, if a Detroit Tiger does not win Rookie of the Year, it's because Bobby Witt Jr. Hit 32 home runs this year, something like that. The guy is just an uber talent. And it's so exciting for baseball in general, and just for the Central Division because of, you think of the hitters the White Sox have in place. You think of what the Tigers are hoping to build with their young players. And now you're going to inject, Bobby Witt and Nick Pratto and Melendez into the Kansas City lineup over the next year or so, and this spring. I think it's a good look for baseball. Some of these young guys are coming. I think Bobby Witt Jr. is going to be right at the forefront of that list. I really like that kid. My bad is Ronald Acuna Jr. I was hoping he'd be back for opening day. Again, baseball needs stars, but they're saying he's out till at least May 1st. So that was a little disappointing. I mean, he's going to be back. It's not the end of the world. He's going to miss 3 weeks, but certainly you always like to have your stars on the field if you're MLB. And again, to me, he's as exciting as there is. I compared him to, someday being the next Willie Mays. That's probably not going to happen, but he's really good. He's somewhere who's going to be in that range. So hopefully he gets back in one piece. And then the ugly Cody Bellinger. I mean, my gosh, you got ugly last year. Now it's 14 Ks and 20 at bats so far this spring. I mean, my goodness. So the Dodgers are cutting bait and they're moving on, and I can't blame them. That is a precipitous fall. I mean, he was last year terrible, and you had to believe he'd go into spring. He'd worked all winter. Maybe he was going to come back and figure something out, and obviously he has not. So I don't know where he goes from here. I'm sure someone takes a chance on him, but the Dodgers don't need to.
Those are some really good and bad uglies there on the fly there, Uper. So, but yeah, they do. MLB does need star power, and we'll get back to the Rockies for a moment. Having Chris Bryant there, that does help a situation and gives them a little bit of star power for an organization that, they have Herman Marquez. They have a couple guys in there. So, but before we get to the questions, one of the things, an interesting article came out today by Chris Mikowski of the Detroit News based off the conversation that AJ Hinch had with media before today's game, and that involved 2021 first round draft pick Jackson Jobe. And in terms of signing him to a affiliate, the Tigers have really kind of the way it seemed like they're not going to rush him into some sort of development. And this is the quote from AJ Hinch from the article, quote, "He's learning how to be a pro. He's been on a 5-day schedule, which implying about throwing. The first time he's ever done that. He's a young kid trying to find his way as a 19-year-old in a very crowded minor league system. The plan for him is to master his pitches before he necessarily worries about the competition. Building a foundation for him is really important. Whether he breaks or not with the team will be determined over the next week." End quote. So I know I liked what you said earlier, Chris, when we were talking before the podcast about this is really not a big deal in a sense because we had a similar situation with, was it Matt Manning you spoke of? Yeah, Matt Manning. And there was a debate that was in our own little DMs on Twitter that was just in terms of high school pitchers and the pros and cons and all that. So, and that was kind of for a while. I was getting, my phone would not stop vibrating on that whole entire back and forth, like the missile war kind of thing. But Chris, this is really nothing to worry about. Am I right?
I'm not terribly concerned. It would be nice to see Jackson Jobe pitch at a game. He didn't after he was drafted last year, and so we're going on like 10 months of him having not pitched competitively in a game. But nobody cares about his first year in the minors. We do, but the organization can't worry about that. It's all about getting him ready and getting him to the majors. We talked about it at the time a ton. The high school pitching is incredibly risky. You get a lot of guys who just completely flame out that it doesn't work at all. And sometimes you get guys who are spectacular, but it takes time for most of them. I mean, the good ones come very, very quickly. Like Clayton Kershaw, Madison Bumgarner were very quick. Rick Porcello came very quickly. He wasn't necessarily one of the great ones, but then, you know, Jacob Turner came really quickly too, and he never really figured it out. And Matt Manning was relatively quick. I think 4 or 5 years, basically. He probably would have been up in 2020 if he hadn't hurt his arm. I figured he would have come up at least for a game or two, just like Mize and Scooble did. But you know, they're going to watch his innings this year. They probably won't let him pitch more than 5 innings in any start. He probably won't go more than 75 pitches in any start. And it's just a matter of learning how to be a professional pitcher. It's one thing to have the pitches and the athleticism and all the tools that he has and everything they like about him, but there's a process to becoming a professional pitcher that he has to learn. So, and you know, who knows what's going on behind the scenes? Maybe they're scrambling and it's a disaster, but I don't think so. I think they're just taking their time, being cautious and trying to build them up the right way.
There's a kind of a debate about whether it was just from the old guard pick versus the new guard pick, and the debate. To me, it's meaningless. And the bottom line is this: look, there's something that, as Tiger fans, we should be, as people that follow the team, what have you. We haven't been able to celebrate as of yet the fact that the Tigers still haven't had a regular infield prospect become a regular as of yet. We still don't have that. You have Ryan Kreidler waiting in the wings, but who knows? I mean, he's done really well in AA and AAA. That you could be very optimistic about that. You could be optimistic about Bo Brisky, Garrett Hill. There's a lot of things to be optimistic about. The Tigers are definitely scouting better, and we saw some things last year in the minor leagues that we haven't seen before, which is significant progress rather. But you can win all the awards you want until they get on a regular level. But it's significant to mention these things because we haven't seen anything like this. This is a norm for, and part of the chat was, well, this is a normal thing for young organizations. Absolutely right. I can't argue what we talked about in there. But that being said, for anybody that follows this team, knows a team, just fans in general have a good memory. And I think people tend to forget. I think sometimes us as fans, but us as people in general that talk baseball, forget that fans remember the Jim Walranders of the world, who was I totally butchered his name, didn't I?
Will Wander.
Thank you. They remember that. They remember the call up potentially of Nelson Simmons in like 85, 86. A lot of people remember these things, but if you look at it in the grand scheme of things, currently you can look at Justin Verlander, all the 06 Joel Zuma, I'm totally blanking here. Zamaya, all these things in the last 20 years or so. But in terms of regular players, this is going to take some time. And my point being is simply this. All the spring training headlines, all the positive vibes, keep them up. Tigers are going to be a good team to watch this year. But what I'm more interested in is what they get from the regular contributions from the farm system. Then we can start celebrating more successes. Then if we get 2 more player out of any of these guys, hey, it's a step forward. If Jackson Jobe takes 4 or 5 years to develop, by all means. But again, I mean, look at the spin rate aside. We knew going into this was going to take some time. So anyway, and my long, incoherent rant there for a moment, I just wanted to mention that because sometimes we do get ahead of ourselves a little bit. We celebrate a little too much about things, but I'm just pumped to see some progress. So, and in terms of, we did get a question there too. So we'll get to that as well in the chat. And Walter Briggs, we haven't seen in a while. Chris, go ahead. You were doing some there.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know if you wanted to. Is it muted over there? I don't want to get the echoes. To your point, nobody gets every draft pick right. Nobody gets every first round pick right. We talk about the Dodgers player development system all the time. I mentioned that guy that we saw on the game tonight. I was like, Jared Kendall, forgot about him. Their first rounder from 2017. He's not going to make the majors. He's a guy who can't hit. He had all the tools in the world. They couldn't make him work. Grant Holmes, they drafted a few years before that. It didn't work out. One of the Sheffield brothers didn't really work out. Like, teams miss on draft picks. It's hard. The Astros blew 2 number 1 overall picks, Brady Aiken and Mark Appel. They blew them. Like, they didn't work out. But the good organizations managed to find talent in other places. And that's what we're seeing from the Tigers now. They're not nearly on the level of the Astros or Dodgers. As Walter mentioned, they really like Christian Santana. He could be one of the first international players that actually works out really well. I don't want to, everybody seems to be excited about him. I don't want to say anything yet. He hasn't even played stateside. But yeah, like you touched on it before, getting Olsen from the Brewers for Daniel Norris. And Olsen, we don't know what he's going to be. He's got 4 solid pitches. His command is a little iffy. His mechanics are a little bit scary. Maybe he's a reliever, but they got something from a left-handed reliever at that point, Daniel Norris, who went on to the Brewers and did nothing for him. I don't think he made the playoffs or playoff roster. Yep. They got Wilmer Flores, an unsigned free agent, for $20,000. He's one of their top 15 prospects. You mentioned Brisky and Hill. I think they like Brisky more than Hill, but so they're finding talent and depth in places that they haven't before, and I think that is a sign of an organization that is growing. They're, like I said, they're not the Cardinals. They're not going to find Matt Adams and Trevor Rosenthal in like the 25th round. They're not getting Josh James yet, but they've got some interesting guys they're finding later, and they're getting talent from elsewhere. We still haven't seen they didn't make any great under the radar trades other than the Olsen, I guess, but I don't know. Alex Lang looks okay. It's the loss of Nick Castellanos. I feel like they're getting better, and sometimes you have to be good enough to live with a draft pick, even if you screw it up. So if Job doesn't work out, hopefully they still got enough talent coming in from other arenas that they can offset that. That's all I was saying.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Chris. And in terms of even to remember where they can get the value out of where they're getting it currently. But Uper, I'll refer to you on what we just discussed, because out of the 3 of us, you have been the steadfast, I guess I don't want to say pessimistic, but you've been kind of, all right, guys, all right, listen, like Rogelio, calm your ass down.
Okay. It's all good.
No, but that's why I like you on the show, because you provide a very unique view than Chris and I both do. And you and I have both agreed about the farm system not being productive.
Yeah.
But in terms of what you've been seeing, you're, like I said, you're just as very critical as any, if not more than anybody else. What's your whole part of this conversation?
I think with Jackson Jobe, obviously, Chris brought up the main points about why it was a little risky to take a high school arm at number 3, a righty. And that's all fine. We can discuss that for a long time, whether they should have went with Marcelo Meyer or not. But I like the fact that, he had some data that they liked, evidently, that they believe in. It's kind of a new way forward for them than what they've done in the past. I do think it's part of the new school guys that wanted him as part of this organization. That's kind of where I am. So, yeah, he could definitely flame out. Bo Burrows was a high school guy, and he never became much of anything other than a filler at the major league level. But I would say, Jackson Jobe's level of work out of high school is superior to Bo Burrows, or even like Jake Thompson or another high school guy that didn't do a lot. So I'm okay on that front. I really am. I think with Jobe, and any worries right now, I don't think anybody should have any worries. I think if he was having like massive control problems that they were mystified about, or if he had any kind of injury, some of that word would have leaked out by now. They can't keep too many secrets down there. So I think they just have a plan and they want to work with him and get him adjusted. And I think when you do invest in a high school guy, a pitcher that early, that unless he's really special, it's going to probably be at least a 3-year process to get him to the major leagues. And that's okay, because, they have the young pitching in place on the big league roster. And if those guys work out, they can wait.
As far, and here's another thing too, to answer Walter's question, I've heard I've heard from a really good source that I trust that Santana is legit. But again, until we see him either at West Michigan or we're going down to Lakeland, planning a trip down to Lakeland in June to go see our good friend of the show, Tiger minor league tracker, aka Kian. Hopefully that all works out. But hopefully we'll see Santana at some point this year. And if we do, we'll give you the honest assessment of what we see. But based off somebody who I know that I trust, and they've been pretty good about being accurate about these things, they've said Santana's legit. So we shall see, because again, Ryan Kreidler is an example of a guy who they made I think it was Cody, the Athletic, and I thought he did a really good job of talking about how he's been in the Tigers biometric. Is it biometric? Did I say that right? Yeah, biometric kind of laboratory of sorts that the Tigers are. I'm paraphrasing, but when have I ever said those two sentences together? Biometrics and the Detroit Tigers. That doesn't happen. So look, if you're gonna tell me I'm a slappy or being optimistic, well, you're wrong. You could see it on there. If I'm gonna, again, keeping it real, you can be excited about baseball, you can be enthusiastic, and you can have hope. And hope is fine. Hope, when you look at it, I think of Pandora's box, the riddle. And the last thing, everything slipped out of the box, every evil in the world. The last thing that was kept in was hope. And if you don't have hope, what does it matter? And but I look at it, there's more than hope. There's more to it. There's actual talent. And that's the hard thing I don't understand. You could be as critical or cynical about the Tigers as you want, and we have been. I mean, if you listen to the best of earlier that we were playing earlier, Chris, some of the stats we were repeating back. We've watched a lot of bad baseball in the past 6 or 7, past 6 years, and Walter definitely, yeah. And you know what, Dan Hasty, God bless you, Dan Hasty, who's down in Lakeland right now. Excuse me, he's in Sarasota because he went to the game today. You can be optimistic. There's things to see, and if you watch as many minor league games or as many games we have, you can be that way. And I trust myself to know when it's, boolah or not. Boolah is going to be a new word, by the way, since we don't swear. Boolah is essentially BS. But boolah sounds cooler than BS. Anyway.
I like it.
So it could be boolah or not. We've seen progress. And Dan Hasty, who does a fantastic job with calling the games, there was a lot of things last year he noticed on the Road to Detroit podcast, which, by the way, congratulations. And that was nominated for an MAB award, the Michigan Association of Broadcasters Award, for a segment they did. And forgive me, I don't have the segment off the top of my head, but they were nominated for a couple of awards. And Dan and Nate Wangler do a fantastic job over there. So kudos to them. But anyway, there was a lot of things last year that you heard during the broadcast that Dan noticed about the team. Same thing with Greg Gagne over in Erie. It's just not just these two players. They still have a long ways to go. So there's a really kind of, I get really kind of mad sometimes when you start getting a little optimistic and fans are like, no. Like, I know the track record, guys. No international talent in a position player ever. Okay. Outside Davey Cruz, pardon me, but you get my point. So anyway, it's cool. And I don't know. I got really mad earlier during the whole chat because I was just like, guys, calm down. All right. I don't need no Dragon Ball Z fast fisting or punching situation. Yeah. Punching situation in Twitter and my DMs. I don't need that. But D from Detroit had a question. Does Kreidler's defense determine Candelario's future with the Tigers? That's a very good question. But, I mean, Candelario grades well in terms of defensively and offensively. He's team's war leader in the last couple of years. And, again, not by default, which somebody else said that on Twitter. Oh, he's the only player on there. Anyway, I think Kreidler's going to be playing short or third. He has that versatility. And Candelario was arbitration eligible. They all agreed, and it's all that. But he's such a good guy in the clubhouse that you could see there's going to be a way for Ryan Kreidler to play on this team. They'll find a way. But I think for now, Candelario is fine. I don't know what you guys think about that, how you guys want to answer that, but I think Candelario is fine right now.
Well, I think if you look at how Jeimer Candelario hit last year, and let's just say that is the guy he is Okay. And he's that guy for the next couple of years. No better, no worse. I mean, Ryan Kreidler's got a lot of work to get to be that good. I mean, that's a really good ball player. So, as he gets a little bit more expensive, and if Kreidler keeps coming on, do they look to make a change? Does Candelario have a trade value to a contender? If indeed the Tigers are not one, when they may well be with the extra playoff spot. I think Candelario, he would have to take a significant step back to be in any danger of losing that job in the next 2 years. Personally.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. I mean, Candelario is projected to be a 3-WAR player this year by Zips. And, it doesn't sound like a ton, but the Tigers have had a scarce number of those guys. And we like Kreidler, but I think he's not quite to that level. If the Tigers do think he is, like you said, Candelario is still under team control for the next 2 years. So if they really, really, really believe in Kreidler and think that he could be as good as Candelario, then maybe they trade Jeimer Candelario and you try to upgrade. Maybe if Kreidler's even just an average player, a 2-win player, but they think they can get a 3-win pitcher for a 3-win third baseman, then you make that move. But I still think that Kreidler's main role this year will be as a guy who comes up potentially as an injury replacement. If Candelario or Baez or maybe even Scope, if one of those guys get hurt, then I think he'll come up and play regularly. And beyond that, I think his value is going to be as a trade piece. I don't know if the Tigers are going to go all in at the deadline this year and try to, upgrade and go for the playoffs. But I also don't picture them. Kreidler made it to AAA last year and played well, like really well. He hit over 300. He hit with power. He played good defense. I don't think they're going to keep him in AAA for 2 more years to stew until Candelario is ready to go or move in free agency. So
he's 24 already. Yeah.
So it's you think he's a trade chip, he's an injury replacement, or maybe they move Candelario. But I don't know. I think for right now they just want him to play as well as he can and improve what he can and move him eventually when they do.
You guys think he could play second?
I'm sure he could. I think that diminishes his value somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's nice to have a good defender anywhere in the infield, but he's got the arm and the glove that you kind of want. If he can play on the left side of the infield, it'd be great to stick over there. I would hesitate to say he's a better defender than Javi Baez. I would never say that, but like theoretically, they could move. Baez does have experience playing second. I don't think Kreidler does.
That's true.
I don't see why he couldn't. I mean, what the difference there is you just have to learn how to make the pivot or whatever from turning a double play. I'm sure
pivot. No, and we had a question about that. I think in the Tiger minor league channel. I think it was in either the Discord or not. Again, I put if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook or Twitch, again, I have put the channel to join the Discord, and we already have somebody in there, and we're Vango. So free chat, just no one's gonna bug you with anything, and so we're up at almost over 100 people on Discord. But anyway. I just think it would be a waste to put him at second base for the gun. I mean, he's got an arm. He got a rocket. I saw the play. I think it was Friday or Saturday. I can't remember what play it was, but third, he just launched. I mean, same thing. In terms of rockets from arms, we're not going to call them piss. We're not going to call them piss missiles because that's bats. So I don't know. We'll come up with something clever for Chris. You're really good with clever stuff. So I expect you to come out of nowhere.
The one other option that somebody, I don't know, it was one of the beat writers mentioned that we might see Kreidler in the outfield actually, which would be interesting. Again, you're kind of diminishing the value by taking a guy who could theoretically play shortstop and put him somewhere else. But if they like his bat that much, they'll find a place for him to play.
I also think it really depends this year what happens with Gage Workman. Workman's had a good camp in terms of showing off his defensibility. And at West Michigan last year, he turned some heads based off his power. He had one of the longest home runs at Lake Michigan or LMCU ballpark. So if Workman continues to develop, there you go. You could eventually see, or even like Workman at short and Kreidler at third as a long-term solution. And I know Tiger fans, prospect fans are like, oh, yes, eternal, yes. But Kreidler could also, if you look at the outfield depth right now in the system that is ready to go, it's very barren. I mean, Jacob Robson was set back down. He's a good fourth outfielder option. Willie Castro played. he played today in right. Was it? Where did he play today in the outfield? Did he play in the outfield recently? What I thought he played in the outfield. Am I just imagining that?
Yesterday, I think.
It was okay. So if that's the case, either way. But we did get some questions. We got a few questions to answer. So Chris, take it away with some of the questions we got.
Yeah, and you were right. Castro played left field today. He played left field the other day too. So they're trying him out there. Yeah, we got a nice assortment of questions here. We got Steve Butts. He said, with the temporarily expanded rosters and Kyle Funkhauser's injury, which is a lat strain, I believe, and Michael Pineda's immigration issues, who is going to be the likely previously unexpected roster additions that will be joining the team? This is something we were going to talk about a lot. For me, I expect it to be one of the middle relief types that have come into the camp, either Miguel Diaz or Will Vest. And then it comes down to me, are they going to have another long reliever? Like, I don't know if Peralta's also having issues and he can't get in, or like a Chase Anderson or a Drew Hutchison, somebody they can remove from the 40-man easily enough, or another utility guy. And as of right now, I think it's probably going to be one of those middle relievers and probably Willie Castro.
As far as Uper, we'll get to you in a second about this. I've been debating back and forth, and we did get another question there too. We'll answer. D will answer a question here shortly. That's a good question. As far as, I think Miguel Diaz did get beat up today a little bit, but I think Will Vest has had a really good camp. He's had an uptick in velocity from last year. Last year when he was in Seattle, he was sitting around 94, 93-ish. Now sitting up closer to 96, 97. Jason Foley's had a really good camp. And Foley's made a case too. He showed a really good slider yesterday. I don't know if you guys saw that slider or not, but that was chef's kiss there. And Foley, we've talked about this on the minor league podcast a few times, that Foley, and I got to give credit to James Chipman about his fastball movement. It was kind of straight, didn't really have him move anything, but he's shown some movement on his pitches, and it helps too. He's like 97, 98, and he has some riding action on his fastball. So I think for Foley, it makes the case for him to kind of perhaps fill in for that Funkhauser role. I mean, and there was a headline today about how Chris Mikowski posted that it's frustrating for Funkhauser. And it's true, because the guy's worked his ass off. I mean, here was a guy who used to be a starter. They asked him to be a reliever, and he was really saved the Tigers bullpen from that stretch when the Tigers got off the horrendous start and started playing 500 baseball in the second half of the season. Funkhauser was a big reason why. He stepped up and did a fantastic job out of the bullpen when they needed him the most. So, but I go with Foley, Diaz, and I know the Tigers like Jack Lopez. He didn't make the team, obviously, but I want to mention him only because I feel like he might be a quick call-up away, because he also played the outfield. He's played short, he played second. Dan Dickerson said on broadcast that third might be a stretch for him, and I completely agree with that. So, Uper, what about you?
No, you jumped in. I think it could easily be Foley. If Diaz has another bad outing like he did, I think they're going to probably go with the velocity. And I think Foley throws hard. And I think Vest throws hard. I think it's going to be one of those guys. And in today's comments, I just, Hinch doesn't throw that out there for Willie Castro for no reason. I think that's a pretty good sign that with 28 guys available, he'll have a spot.
So we did get a question in the YouTube chat from D from Detroit. Is Parker Meadows finally starting to turn the corner? And we're going to be doing a video. There's some more videos we're working on that I've been saying this for a couple of days, but the truth be told, it's just been between setting up everything today and all that, but I'm not going to make excuses. There's going to be some videos. One of the videos is going to try to find out the swing mechanic changes, but he's looked good. He's hit the ball really hard in camp. But to answer your question, D, until you see him in a situation that's not like spring training. I mean, if he starts the season in Erie, that's a good sign because he hasn't played above high A yet. But I like the renewed optimism in Parker Meadows. I know he gets a lot of prospect guys give him bum rap. I know that there's certain people out there, but it's too early to tell, to be honest with you, until we see him in regular action. But what we've seen so far is improvement.
Let's see him hitting 290 on July 4th. Then we'll talk.
Yeah, I mean, the bar is awfully low here. I mean, this is a guy who just hasn't hit as a pro. He's got 3 hard hit balls in spring that we're kind of excited about. And if he made some real changes, he's a guy that they've always liked his underlying tools. So if he can hit the ball, then suddenly he becomes a lot more interesting. But yeah, I mean, this is one of those cases where you can be optimistic, but not expect a ton. If it works out, then that's an awesome development, and kudos to him and to the new development staff. But what we've seen so far, it doesn't suggest that he's going to be a hitter. But cross your fingers and hope for it.
And to answer your question about, you asked about Franklin Perez, we haven't heard or seen anything as of yet. So I wish we had more data on that. If we were down in Lakeland, probably go in maybe the minor. We would spend a lot of time in the minor league camp if we could. But once the regular season starts, we'll have Jake. Jake's going to be out in Toledo, by the way, for opening day for the Mud Hens. And right now, I think Chris and I are trying to figure out opening day for the Tigers. I'll try to be out there. We're going to be out there for Tigers opening day for tickets wise. But the Whitecaps open the season in Midland, so we're thinking about driving up there to go see opening day out there. So we'll see what happens, and we'll get back to that. So let's continue on, Chris. What's the next set of questions?
So then our buddy Steve Cook, Slap Happy Cookie or whatever, he said, can you guys talk about how much the infield defense has improved since last year? It's a lot. This is the best Tigers infield defense since when? Pretty solid group. Every guy is above average to Gold Glove, he says. So when's the last time a Tigers had a defensive infield this good in your mind?
Well, 2009, they signed Adam Everett, and they still had Polanco, correct? Maybe that's it. I don't know.
I'm trying to think about this in terms of it has to be around the time with Polanco being there. I don't know. That 2006 team had a pretty solid defense.
That's what I was thinking. 2006, 2007. I don't remember when exactly they got Polanco. If it was 2005, did they get Polanco?
Yeah, mid-season, 2005.
So, I mean, you had Inge at third base and Guillen at shortstop. I mean, Guillen was a pretty good shortstop when he was healthy. And then first base at 2007, first base was Sean Casey. And I think that was probably their best all-around defensive infield in the last 15 years. I mean, they've had some good fielders since then. Jose Iglesias was flashy. Adam Everett, as you mentioned. Johnny Peralta graded above average somehow. And Ian Kinsler was a great second baseman. But, usually the corners have been the issue. So, I don't know. It should be exciting. And we'll see what happens. I mean, Baez has been a Gold Glover. Barnhart is a Gold Glover. Scope is better at second base than first base. Torkelson seems fine at first base. I think they're he'll probably grade out below average just because everybody does at first base. And Candelario's is average to maybe somewhere a tick below or a tick above. So, it's a solid infield defense.
How do you guys think Scope is aging physically in terms of, does he look a little bigger to you than he was a few years back?
He always looks bigger to me than I realize because he's like 6'3" and 225 pounds or whatever. I don't. He may have gotten thicker. The only guy I noticed this year is Zach Short looked a lot thicker. Eyes and butt. I'm like, oh, look at that, look at that. But I haven't zeroed in on Scope. I'll check it out next time.
Part of my which way the gym is pointing sign, but yeah, Short definitely looks a little bigger, and he's already in terms of very power number. Like the guy's already has some pop to his bat, but. As far as Scope is concerned, and Walter brought up Brandon Inge as part of that defense. You're absolutely right, Walter. He did hold it down at third, but I would say around that period of time. To me, I think that one of the things that I'm excited for about having Baez and Scope turn, and Dan Dickerson made a really, again, paraphrasing what he was talking about yesterday about the pivot with that should be the name of the episode today, but. They play together. I believe I can't remember what system. I think it was in the Cubs system. Scope and Baez played together. Did you guys know that?
Really?
I didn't know that. Yeah.
No, because let's see. Baez has always been in the Cubs. Scope was
Orioles,
and then the Brewers.
Yeah.
Was he on the Twins at one point too?
Yeah. Scope played for the Twins. Yes, 1 year.
Now they may have. Yeah, I don't know when they would have played together. That's interesting.
They didn't play, like, they're not from the same country because
Scope
played for the Netherlands in Curacao.
And Baez is Puerto Rican, I believe, right?
Yeah.
on that. So that's my bad. But that being said, either way, I just remember that he was talking about how they will feed off each other on that. So, but my mistake on that. That's if we had to do an ESPN, what's that show where the guy comes out and does a correction? That would be it right there. So glad that we have the internet. Milwaukee. Oh, he said okay. So Walter Briggs in the YouTube channel was talking about the Brewers in a little bit, and then and that Scope actually lost weight this year. So,
oh, okay,
yeah, there you go. So, all right, on to the next question.
And this one, you actually found this one he said from Mark and Motown Mark and GB. He said, is the next big move solidifying and extending AJ Hinch as the manager? And he said, I think it should be. He's clearly been an influence on what they are doing throughout the organization.
Definitely. I mean, 100%. That should be the priority. And right now, everybody's pointing at the sign that with Baez and Rodriguez having those 2-year opt-outs is right around the time that Hinch's contract ends. I think the Tigers will make that a top priority, as they should. Because if you look at, there's something that I was thinking about the other day with when we had Crystal and Janice on from the White Sox. Hinch, in theory, if it wasn't for Jerry Reinsdorf, would be in Chicago right now. Period. There's no debate about it. I remember Chris finding that tweet where AJ Hinch's signature was on. Remember that last year? It was a whole debacle. But if you look at it in the grand scheme of things in terms of young talent, Detroit actually edges out Chicago. The White Sox's minor league system is not that good. They really have a bunch of players that are high A or mid A right now, but in terms of Tigers have a slight advantage up there. So it's a no-brainer. There's been a mindset. The way he managed last year, normally, like I said, I think with managers, I've always been on the philosophy about what Sparky Anderson has said, that it's really it's the talent you have in the field, and the rest is just kind of being like a psychologist, what have you. Hinch graduated with a psychology degree from University of Stanford, which is not, man, it's a pretty damn good school. And to be able to pull the Tigers out of that tailspin to start the season last year with a roster essentially that Ron Gardenhire essentially had minus a few players here and there, it's impressive. He used Harold Castro, hitting Harold Castro. As much as we all joke about Harold Castro, and just he found a way to utilize him really well. I thought the way he did that last year was phenomenal. And given Akil Baddoo enough time to reset himself when he was having moments where he was struggling as a Rule 5 guy, it's amazing. And the way he managed the bullpen. So if they don't do it, that should be number one priority before anything else.
You got to believe that they want to. I mean, they've made so many of these hirings throughout the organization that at least have had whispers of having his fingerprints on them, or if, at least his approval. If they're going to build around like that, you think they're going to want to lock him up. Now, if he does have this opt-out, which I don't know if that's ever been confirmed, that Lynn Henning mentioned. The nice thing about opt-outs is as long as you have it, you have that little bit of power that you give away when you sign something else. So he'll have to weigh if he has a lockout, or does he an opt-out, or does he want the long-term security of a 5-year deal? Probably will take the 5-year deal.
But not really. I mean, yeah, it would be nice. AJ Hinch seems like a really good manager. It'd be nice to get him locked up, but I don't know. Who knows what goes on behind the scenes? Who knows what he wants to do? Maybe he wants to be back. Maybe he'll be back in Houston in a year or two, where his family lives. It's got to be tough to be a manager away from your family. So, I don't know. We'll see.
All right, we got any more questions?
A couple more. Deadly Ninja B said, is Willie Castro a better player than Ryan Kreidler? His OBP was 273 last year. His fielding is gruesome. I will say that he might be better than Ryan Kreidler. We don't know. Probably not. Maybe. But that's more of a matter of roster resources, right? Like, do you want Ryan Kreidler up playing every third or fourth day? Probably not, because he's still developing. I don't know. So I don't know if you guys have anything else to add to that.
I got no. I mean, I don't got anything.
And then we got let's see, Epic D3C from he's on the Discord. He said, "Do the Tigers make the playoffs?"
I don't think. No, I don't. Look, as much as I'm buying into the optimism, and every fan should be, they're going to be improved. They're going to be definitely improving. They're going to be an improved ball club from last year. I should have just said that versus the way I said it the first time. But as far as getting, in terms of getting the 500, or even I'm sorry, getting the playoffs, look what Toronto did. Toronto is just Toronto's going to be a juggernaut. You saw the Yankees that are really good. Boston, there's a lot of things with Boston there that they got to the postseason last year. You have Seattle. Seattle quietly, the team I think in the American League that's going to be Seattle's expected to get in the playoffs. Don't get me wrong, but I think Seattle's might be better than we anticipate. And Toronto did enough to line themselves up. As far as the AL Central, as far as that goes, in terms of the Tigers, I think would have to win the division to get in the playoffs. I really believe that, and that means surpassing the Twins and surpassing the White Sox. And I don't know if they're there yet. I'm, again, not trying to be Debbie Downer here with that, but based off I did not know Marvin Gonzalez was the Yankees. Sorry, totally ADHD moment there. But I don't think the Tigers have enough offense to get there. I really don't. I mean, you can talk about the 11 walks they had yesterday against the Phillies. Yeah, but the Phillies don't have any good pitching. And it's spring training. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you could be encouraged on what you saw on Spencer Torkelson and Riley Green on pitch recognition all day long. You should be ecstatic. You should be pleased as punch, as they say, which I never. Yeah, anyway, it's a weird phrasing, pleased as punch. But no, you should be very optimistic about that. And we did get a question in YouTube, by the way, or Chris, unless you want to add anything, you guys, gentlemen. No?
Nope.
Okay. So it looks like the last question is from Walter on YouTube. Are we done? Are the Tigers done with Brian Garcia? I put him on one of the guys who is potentially at risk to lose his position on the roster. And I cited some stats that were interesting. And there was one stat that Chris and I were going back and forth about, a stat that whether or not it really matters or not. But the league, in terms of when he was ahead of the count, when the batter was down in the count and Brian Garcia was ahead of the count, teams hit 320 off Brian Garcia. And what was the league average, Chris? What was that average that you pulled up?
I want to say 175 or something like that, in that range, between 170 and 190.
And there was only two pitchers that were worse than Brian Garcia. That's it. And in terms of getting swing and miss stuff, it's not as present as it was in 2019. And you can look at his ERA and there's, excuse me, in 2020. I know we had a writer. We talked about this a couple of years ago about how good his season was. But if you look deeper in the numbers, his xERA was a little higher than his ERA, his FIP. So he got some luck. And Brian Garcia is the guy who works extremely hard. But at the same time, I don't think there's enough swing and misses there with his slider. And Chris, you said this earlier, we're talking, his changeup's better than his slider. But he doesn't really get a lot of people to chase. And if you don't have a good K per 9, you're not going to survive in the American League as a reliever. It's that simple.
Yeah, I think his days in the organization are numbered as well. So yeah, like you said, he's probably one of the top 2 DFA candidates, along with Del Pozo, and they have. It's not that hard to find middle relievers, unfortunately, for him, and that's just the way it goes. It's. I would say the other day, it's always bums me out when you see these kind of older middle relievers who can't hack it, but it's a nasty game, and if you can't get people out, then that's there's not much use for you.
I bet they stashed him at Toledo, but yeah, I don't disagree with that. Anything you guys say on that one?
But as far as that, go ahead, Chris.
Oh no, there were just 2 more questions.
Okay.
I know.
My bad. I didn't see those. My bad.
No, yeah, they're on the. They were on Twitter. Steve Cook again asked for our expectations for Joey Wentz this year, and then Nick Spillane asked us if there are any trade partners for some of the logjam type players in the system, like Daz Cameron, Cody Clemens, and Isaac Paredes. So,
Cooper, you want to go ahead and start that one off? That's the Nick one's a really good question on that one.
The trade partner.
Sorry about that, Uper. Go ahead.
I think with the trade partners for Cameron, and those type of players, obviously you then have to be dealing them off for very young players who don't have to be on the roster. I'm very skeptical that they have a big trade value. I'm not sure what you could get. I mean, whatever you're going to get is going to be very minimal. So I would be very surprised if any moves like that happen.
As far as trade partners are concerned with guys like for Paredes who got injured earlier today, but he made a really nice play at second on cleaning up, but apparently everything was okay. He had to leave the game, but still, the thing about Paredes is I think he has a role on this team because he can play third, he can play short, he can play second. There's a team out there, I think, that would have to, we've seen this before with Al Avila kind of being scared to pull the trigger on some of the players. I mean, they traded Nick Quintana for Tucker Bernhardt because Cincinnati did not want to pay the money. Simple as that. And the Tigers gave away a second-round draft pick that did not work out and getting Quintana a fresh start, if you will. But as far as trade partners, I mean, you would like to believe that Oakland's still in the mix for Frankie Montas, but the Tigers' rotation seems to be set. They could trade for an outfield bat out there, a bat, I should say, a more established bat that maybe needs a new change of scenery, if you will. But off the top of my head right now, we got a question in our Discord channel too, so we'll get to that in a second as well. But as far as the outfield goes, as far as trade partners go, the Tigers have a notorious history with trading the Cubs. It seems like the Cubs, Oakland, they've done some trades with before in the past. I feel like I'm missing somebody in terms of recent trade partners.
Oakland, yeah, Cubs.
I think that's really about it. They don't really.
They haven't ventured too far out.
Arizona.
Yeah, Arizona. By the way, and yeah, of course. Hi, by the way, to Hen's Highlights there on YouTube channel, who's been watching both shows this week. So thanks for joining us this evening on that. But a team. Here's the thing: like I look at a team that needs a center fielder with Derek Hill, and Lynn Henning today, the Detroit News, retired or however Lynn Henning's role is. First and foremost, Lynn Henning, thank you for recommending our podcast to people to check out on Twitter. So I don't know. Did we ever say thank you? Did we? I
think we had our guests on. I don't think we got around to it. That was wonderful of him.
Yeah. Because big thing. Thank you, Lynn Henning, man of the people, a joyer of the first time I ever got to meet him was episode 240, the shrimp boil caper, which was 3 years ago. And Lynn's been a really good supporter. And honestly, thank you. That made my day. But Lynn Henning tweeted earlier that Derek Hill has potentially be traded. And as far as the center field options out there for teams, off the top of your head, guys, I'm trying to think of, the Pirates could use one right now. I know that Anthony Alfred is their center fielder, and he's playing left or right, or is he starting in center?
I thought they had Brian Reynolds in center, but I don't know.
Oh, yeah. But they could trade for an outfielder because Alfred's been struggling in spring training so far. So I can see the Pirates on top of my head. I'm trying to think of another team. The White Sox need an outfielder. They definitely need a right. The White Sox, but then you look at who they have. There's not really anybody worth of value. They're not going to trade Oscar Colas. They're not going to trade the other Cespedes. So you're not going to really help your division. So I don't like it. Cleveland could always use an outfielder. That's a generic joke we always talk about. But Toronto just got a center field. They're from Arizona. So I'm drawing a blank in terms of anybody else. But I really think that Paredes' role is still going to be on this team. I think he has a way to go about it. But they have to. I think they're going to make a trade. But to who they're going to trade is anyone's guess at this point. But they kind of have to make a trade. So
okay.
Yeah, all I'll say is that those guys in particular, I think to trade them, it's going to have to go to a team that's not interested in competing this year and has playing time. And I don't know how many of those teams there are. Like you mentioned Pittsburgh, they got a loaded system. Baltimore, maybe as somebody who we're still giving guys a chance. But really, there aren't that many. We talked about Arizona a little bit, Colorado maybe. But yeah, I don't know. I think we may see a series over the next 2 years, a series of guys getting kind of designated for assignment and claimed, which is not. I mean, we saw a little bit of it in the recent years with guys like John Schreiber and Sergio Alcantara and stuff like that. It just may be the way it's going to go because the Tigers roster has gotten better over the last 2 years, and sometimes you lose guys. And then to Steve's point or question about Joey Wentz, I expect Joey Wentz to pitch about 100 innings in Toledo this year. And probably be the third starter up when the Tigers need somebody. I would imagine it'll be a couple of veterans first, but Wentz is on the 40-man roster, and I do think we'll see him in Detroit this year if he stays healthy. It was nice seeing him throw harder the other day. His secondary still weren't really there. His command wasn't really there, but he's a guy that they will, I think, call on at some point to start for them this year.
Definitely. There's the Wentz's ceiling. He looked good in the only limited one start we saw him in spring training, and the velocity was up, and he looked a lot better than when we first saw him in Erie last year. He was still trying to figure things out. I think it was 3 or 4 inning limits he had last year, the Seawolves, Chris. Is that correct? Does that sound right?
I don't think it was necessarily innings limits. I think it was pitch limits. I think he was limited to 80 pitches. But no, he kept getting like 3 inning starts because he just could not put anybody away last year. He was getting like these 8, 10, 12 pitch at bats where he would – they just foul pitch off or after pitch off. He wasn't throwing nearly as hard, and who knows if he will when he's stretched out more. I think he was only out there for an inning or two, so he's probably throwing harder. But yeah, he's a guy who he doesn't have a ton of margin for error, but his stuff is decent enough. He's a big body. He's got an interesting angle. I think he can work as a back end of the rotation starter, but he just needs to refine his command.
Yeah, I mean, as far as that goes, it gives the Tigers to have him back in the rotation is great, because especially with again, there was another debate in the Twitter chat we had about Bo Biscuit being legit or not, and that's another story for the day. The Jack Lopez question came from Discord. What's the story with him? Essentially, he's going to be down in Toledo, but he might be one of the first guys to be called up. He play short, he play second, and like I mentioned earlier, he plays the outfield. So Lopez. And if anybody's seen Red versus Blue, the whole Halo show that came out, bonus points for understanding that Lopez reference. If you don't, and you look at me like a guy, I was wrong. So, anyways, but Chris, was that the final of the questions? All right. So we are going to be talking Royals this week with one of our friends, Max, over at Royals Review, SB Nation site. We have had on now. We had him on last year after absence, and Max is good people. He actually was he born here, Chris? Do you remember? I think he said he was from the area, and then he moved down to Kansas City, I think.
That sounds right. Yeah, then we can ask him again.
Yeah. So we're gonna talk Royals, and I'm sure Uper will gush over Bobby Witt Jr. some more, and that's fine. But yeah, they'll be talking some Royals this week. We'll have a couple articles. We'll have some 40-man previews coming out. Akil about you here in the next couple of days. Check out MCB. Go to MotorCityBengals.com and look at the MCB Sunday notes I just posted. We also have a new writer, Gabe Feldman, who wrote a opening day roster 1.5 because Chris did the 26 tickets to opening day, so we're keeping up with that. Tomorrow's going to be some cuts announced, so we'll be definitely talking about that on Thursday. We're going to be probably doing Tigers for at least a half hour, 45 minutes before Max. So if we would have had this show done this Thursday, we would have not gotten off till after midnight. So I'm glad that we were able to separate that. And Uper and I are going to go off right now, and we're part of a fantasy league. Actually, I was going to throw this idea out there for the audience before I go. If anybody wants to start a fantasy league, which I don't have to run and not be responsible for, if one of the fans listening to the podcast right now wants to start a fantasy league for Tigers podcast people, leave us a comment or let us know on social media, or Twitter, Tigers Radio Pod, or at our email, tigersSRD@gmail.com.
And use the Yahoo.
Yeah. Thank you. Use Yahoo, because Yahoo is a lot easier of a format. But if you have a preference for Fat Tracks or anything like that, look, in terms of fantasy baseball out there, there's a million things you can do right now. Our friend Michael Gouvet, who writes all over, does a fantasy podcast. It's I was trying to blank on his name on the podcast.
Enrico Palazzo,
yeah. Yes, thank you. From, of course,
Gouvier.
Naked Gun. Yeah. Gouvier. Michael Gouvier does a really good job. There's so many fantasy baseball sources out there. Marty Tillman, former writer for MCB. But if you want to start a simple introduction league for Tiger fans out there, if you want to, please go ahead. We'll participate in it.
Yes.
And we'll have fun with it. And I promise you, look, as far as maybe knowing baseball is great, but fantasy, I was towards the tail bottom of our league last year in the Fred Merle League, which has been going on. Uper gave me some really good history about that league, which I was not aware of. So, but if you want to start a league, just let us know. And again, subscribe to our Patreon, Tigers Minor League Report. As we again, it's been picking up steam. Minor league season is just around the corner. And we have plenty of extra content, bonus stuff. The videos, I promise you, we've been cranking them out. Chris and I were going over some of the Bo Brisky stuff. And the draft. So, what time's the draft? 7 minutes?
7 minutes.
All right, we got to go. Thanks so much for listening. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you on Thursday. Have a good week, everybody.
Peace.